Austin Romaine is finally getting the credit he deserves.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Got a fun episode for you today. Have a new commit for Kansas State football. We're going to get to that one, why the Big 12 is in a great position for the college football playoffs and why that impacts Kansas State in the future, although it might not be them this year around. And we're going to get into some advanced data from the Texas Tech game. I know you might not want to continue talking about the Texas Tech game as we sit in the bye week, but a guy like Austin Romaine deserves that credit, and we're going to do that on today's show. Before we do so, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll hit $300 in bonus bets to use across the app, so download that app today. The Texas Tech game did not go as planned. They lose 43-20. They get their third loss in Big 12 play. They get 5 turnovers on the offense. We can go on and on. We did in the reaction show on Saturday afternoon after the football game. But what was most important here is we saw some redemption from some of these players. The defense, I think, honestly did their job overall. They got 2 turnovers. Yes, they did allow 436 total yards against a team that is now 8-1 and in the college football playoff rankings as a team that's going to host a playoff game. So you're talking about a top 8 seed in the nation. So I think you did a lot of good things on the defensive side, and it's fun now that we're getting the credit to one of the defensive leaders that has had a really rough year overall back and forth. And I'm talking about Austin Romaine. Austin Romaine was named the PFF Defensive Player of the Week. He was named to the defensive, the all PFF team for week 10 as well. And he really deserved it. And he got that acknowledgement over Jacob Rodriguez of Texas Tech, the linebacker, because he had a better PFF score overall. And you know, whether you follow this advanced data or these analytics or you could care less about them, the fact that those numbers are in favor of a guy in Austin Romaine who has having to deal with injuries and, you know, just having adversity in front of him, obviously not having a great season with the record for Kansas State, a guy that came in as potentially being a all Big 12 linebacker. I went on record at one point saying I think he's a top 75 draft pick in the upcoming NFL draft. And now we're starting to finally see the respect that is deserved of Austin Romaine. He had a 90.5 pass rush grade in the game on Saturday against Texas Tech. And defensive overall grade was a 79.2. He was third on the team, but the pass rush, I think, is what really put him in that category to help him win the the PFF player of the week for the defensive side. He played 59 snaps out of the 78 that the defense played for Kansas State. And what was most importantly for me was what I was waiting for is last week in the game against Kansas, he had 8 missed tackles, and it had a lot to do with the fact that he has a club around his hand. He's dealing with a hand injury. Coach Klanderman brought up the fact that it's a nagging injury. They have to have him still on the field, though, because of his high football IQ, because of the alignments he needs to know, and just really his leadership. And he had that again on Saturday against Texas Tech, and that didn't slow him down this time. He got an interception with that club hand on the first defensive drive for Kansas State, and then he also only had, and this is in good graces. I mean this in the best way possible. He only had 2 missed tackles compared to the 8 in the week prior. He had 8 tackles, he had 7 assists, and he had 2 missed tackles. So impressive stuff from Austin Romaine in this one. He did allow his only reception on the only target that was passed to him, but it's for only 4 yards. So whatever on that case. But the fact that he only had 2 missed tackles in a game where a week prior in the Sunflower Showdown, he had 8 is a huge improvement. Now, that's still an issue on the defensive side overall. Missed tackles was definitely a big issue. And I'm going to be completely honest, there was only 14 missed tackles in this game, according to PFF. And I say only because I thought this game was much worse when I was watching this initially. compared to the Sunflower Showdown. I thought this was a terrible tackling effort game by Kansas State, but according to PFF here, only 14 missed tackles out of the 78 snaps that they had in this football game. Obviously that could improve. There's no doubt about it. I think anytime you see that reach double digits, it's a problem. But again, you're playing a really, really good football team in Texas Tech. I think it's really great that Austin Romaine is getting the credit he deserves. I personally think that he still has the opportunity to be, even with the injury, a top 100 draft pick. I mean, a round 2, round 3 kind of guy. I really do think that he has the ability for what it takes to play on Sundays. I think him and Jacob Rodriguez are probably 2 of the best linebackers in the country, let alone the Big 12. So it's really fun to watch. First of all, watch both of those play on Saturday against Texas Tech, but then Austin Romaine kind of get the nod over Jacob Rodriguez this past week when he's even dealing with that hand injury. So I really appreciate what we saw from Austin Romaine, and I love that he got the recognition he deserved. What I'd like to see from him the rest of the way. Now, obviously, he can't dictate the scoreboard. Really, he can't dictate the record. Of course, we want to find a way for Kansas State to go 2-1 the rest of the way to at least make it to a bowl game. But what I'd like to see from Austin Romaine as an individual is just consistency. And the fact that if he's got to probably most likely play with a club on his hand the rest of the season, I would just like to see consistency. No boneheaded mistakes, no 8 missed tackles. And we've now seen that you can play with this cast on your hand and only have 2 missed tackles in your 60 snaps out on the football field. You need to show that you can continue that for the rest of the games this season so you can build yourself a nice resume the rest of the way when it's time to go to the NFL Combine in the spring when you're a lot healthier and ready to go. I think that will put you in a good situation to get yourself ready for the NFL draft in April and find yourself in a good spot in the NFL draft when it's all said and done. I think he's an NFL draft caliber player. Do you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you even do, I mean, shout out. Well, who's your favorite team? Who would you love to see Austin Romaine play for on Sundays? I think it'd be really fun to watch him play on defense in the NFL. I think he has what it takes for sure. Rounding it out here, let's just talk about the defense. According to PFF grades, we didn't get a chance to do that this week because of the bye week and basketball starting. There were 78 defensive snaps. We'll get into our favorite stat that started off here. Zayshawn Rich played all 78 snaps. Now, he did not have the best game by any stretch of the imagination. It was probably, I mean, if you're looking at the grades right now, he had a 49.8 grade. He had a 50.8 coverage grade. It was probably one of the worst games that Zayshawn Rich played all season. He allowed 6 receptions on 8 targets for 87 yards receptions, including one that was a 42-yard reception, and did allow 2 touchdowns in the game. Both of the touchdowns that were thrown in Zayshawn Rich's direction, but he played all 78 snaps. That's still got to tell you something. That's still got to tell you that they believe in this guy, whether you think it's the fact that they don't believe in their depth or the fact that they believe in Zayshawn Rich. I think it's the latter, because I think there's enough depth on this team that you could pull him out for a couple plays and see what other players have, and you don't choose to do that. You think he's your number one. And whether he gets picked on at moments where he allows 6 receptions on 8 targets, maybe you're willing to test that to make sure and see if he's ready to go for the next season. Maybe he's now turned into let's see what he's got so we can maybe push forward. I'm not sure. I will say this, when we get to the transfer portal window, cornerback and secondary once again will be a huge thing that we push and talk about on this show. I think we had some questions answered over the last couple weeks. Even with this Texas Tech game, I think there was a couple questions answered with this secondary, but I do still think it's going to be a weakness for a few seasons, at least until they start building up the recruiting levels. I mean, if Logan Bartley can make a next step forward, it'd be nice if he decides to stick around. He only played 2 defensive snaps in this football game. And then, of course, if they can continue this transfer portal, I have a feeling it's going to be a really busy transfer portal season in January for K-State. Speaking of cornerbacks, Amarian Fortenberry led the defense with the best defensive grade in his 20 snaps. He had an 83.3 defensive grade. He only played 7 coverage snaps, but in those 7 coverage snaps, he had an 88.7 in coverage grade against Texas Tech. He only allowed 1 reception on 3 targets, and that 1 reception was just like Austin Romaine. It was only for 4 yards. Overall, I think the defense played great. I mean, I think they played well enough in any other situation that if Kansas State, if their offense didn't allow 5 turnovers, this defense would have been able to do everything they possibly could have to keep them in the football game. If you go back, if you take away 3 of those turnovers for K-State, they're right in this football game. If the turnover margin is equal, 2 apiece, they're right in this football game. So I think this defense did exactly what they needed to do. The offense is what screwed the pooch, in my opinion, in this football game on Saturday. And so I don't want to take a lot from this defense. They were easily the better half of this football team this past Saturday. They need an all-around effort this coming week after the bye week this weekend against Oklahoma State. Screw their record. Kansas State and Stillwater is not always the best thing, and they have to win that game if they want to make it to a bowl game the way that Utah's been playing. And you never know about a Colorado team, even though they've been up and down. You never know. They have to win this game against Oklahoma State so they can at least split the final 2 and get themselves to 6-6. That's where we're at now. After maybe potentially thinking you're going to be a 10-2 team, you're hoping and praying to be in a bowl game moving into this season. It sucks, but that's just the way the cookie crumbled this season. All right, next up on the docket, I want to get into some huge news for the Big 12. The college football playoff rankings came up, and although Kansas State's name's not on that for obviously good reason, a lot of Big 12 names are near the top, and why that's a huge bonus, a huge plus for the Wildcats and their conference for the rest of the way. We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. The part finder tools in 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. So join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line all in one spot. All you have to do is visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5, all one word, for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. The college football playoff rankings made their initial rankings on Tuesday, and it's good news for the Big 12. And maybe not good news for Kansas State overall, because, of course, they're nowhere to be found in these rankings with a 4-5 record on the season. But we are seeing 3 Big 12 teams with the possibility of finding themselves in the 12-team bracket when the season's all said and done. Really good chance that there are potentially 3 teams from the Big 12 in the college football playoffs. And remember, only 1 team from last year made it. That's Arizona State. There was a lot of criticism, the fact that BYU didn't make it last year. Arizona State was very close from beating Texas in the second round of the playoffs. That would have really, changed the entire landscape, I think, of the entire college football playoffs last year and how they looked at it. But the committee looks like they've changed their tune on the Big 12. And really, you kind of have no way around it the way that they've been playing so far this season. BYU was ranked 7th after being 8-0 on the season. Texas Tech, the team that just beat Kansas State on Saturday at 8-1, is right behind them at the 8th spot. And Utah, the team that Kansas State has to play in a few weeks in Salt Lake City, is sitting at 13th with their 7-2 record. Now, only 12 teams make the college football playoff. Also 5 conference winners, so there's a group of 5 there. So with the initial college football rankings went out, the top 10 teams in the college football playoff rankings made it, plus the winner of the conference in the ACC, which was Virginia, as the projected right now, was sitting at the 14th seed. And then an unranked team in Memphis, not a single G5 school was ranked in the initial rankings, but Memphis gets the nod as the first ranking of the projected G5 team to make it. So at this moment in the first projected college football playoff rankings, there are 2 Big 12 teams in it with BYU and Texas Tech. Now, they both play each other this week. That's College game day. And some people think that it could be an elimination game for one of these teams if they lose that one, mainly Texas Tech, because that would give them their second loss of the season. I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that by any stretch of the imagination, because I don't think that even if Texas Tech loses this football game, they get ranked lower than Utah, which is sitting at 13. So I think it's a really good shot that even with one obviously losing the game on Saturday, you still have them in good position moving forward. If you want to be a fan of the Big 12, if you're just a Big 12 believer and want to find a way to get more than one team in, here's what I think you want to root for this weekend. I mean, this is obvious. I think this one's obvious. You want Notre Dame out of the picture. Right now, they're sitting in the 10 seed. They're 6-2 on the year. The committee, the way that they talked about Notre Dame, I think they were more focused on how their losses were really good losses compared to their actual wins. If they get their third loss, it doesn't matter. They're out of the picture completely, especially since they won't be in a conference championship game. They play Navy this week, and Navy was undefeated until they lost to North Texas this past week. That's a rivalry. Notre Dame's always a fun game. It could be an interesting one. I'm not going to say that Notre Dame loses that football game, but you never know. You never know. If you're a Big 12 fan, I think you're rooting for Navy against Notre Dame on this one. And then I think you got to find a way in your hearts, if you're to find a way to cheer for at least one side of an SEC school. Vanderbilt takes on Auburn this weekend, and Auburn obviously firing their coach in Hugh Freeze, DJ Durkin taking over as the interim head coach. That defense on Auburn hasn't been the issue. It's been the offensive side. So maybe that firing of Hugh Freeze just helps give a spark to the offense. That defense alone, I think it's like the third best defense in the country, and they still can't find a way to win in the SEC because of that offense. Vanderbilt, if they lose that game, they're out of the picture. Right now, they're the 16 seed. But Diego Pavia, the hype behind him, I have a feeling maybe a little bit of SEC bias might come into play. But if Auburn can spoil them, then they're out of the picture as well. So those are the two that I'm really focusing on like the teams that you should probably pay attention to and maybe root against. Oregon takes on Iowa this week as well. I think you want to root for Iowa in that conversation. If it moves Oregon out of the picture. And then, look, I don't know if the ACC is going to have more than one. They might not have any. If a couple things keep falling out of place for the ACC, I think there's a true possibility that two G5 schools, although right now none of them are ranked, but like let's put, for example, Memphis and maybe North Texas, both of them, if they continue to win and one of them wins the American, of course, they're going to be in. And then let's say San Diego State, if they win out and finish the season 11-1, they'll have wins against Boise State. Their only loss of the season will be against a Washington State team early in the season. And remember, Washington State has some good losses on their books, with only losing to Virginia. They almost beat Ole Miss. That one went down to the wire. So I think there's a true possibility that if the ACC doesn't wake up in these last few weeks, that we could see 2 to 3 Big 12 schools, 0, 1 at best ACC school, and maybe even potentially 2 G5 schools that do not include Notre Dame if Notre Dame loses one more football game this year. This has a really wild ending. There's some really crazy things that could happen with this college football playoff this season. Kansas State could play spoiler to Utah. They absolutely could. They play Utah in a few weeks. Now, they might get spoiled before that. Utah is on an open week this week, but the following week, while we play Oklahoma State, Utah takes on Baylor, and Baylor seems to have found a little bit of juice back in the system as well. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Big 12 does not get 3 teams. I think it's possible. I don't think they're going to get 3 teams. I think the 2 we see on Saturday in BYU and Texas Tech do get in the college football playoffs, though. I think we do get 2 teams in the college football playoffs this year. I think this game on Saturday is a potential rematch coming in against for the Big 12 championship later on this season in Arlington. I think this is the game we're going to get for who wins the Big 12. And I think both these teams find themselves in the college football playoffs. Whoever wins this game, and obviously whoever wins the Big 12 championship, will host. And then I think whoever is the runner-up will be one of the teams that goes to a host. So it's like a 9 through 12 seed to finish off the year. That's my initial reaction. I don't think Utah gets in. I think Utah finds a way to get spoiled eventually, whether it's Kansas State that does it or Baylor beforehand. I think Utah finds a third loss somewhere around down the road in that one. Later on in the weeks, while we're playing Oklahoma State, something to just look forward to. Oklahoma and Texas both play some really tough games. They're right around the 11 and 12 seeds. So if you're a Utah fan, if you're a Big 12 fan, you want to get that third team in, and you want to see Utah, and you want to see Texas and Georgia, or Texas and Oklahoma lose next week in their matchups as well. All right, let's finish up this episode with a really fun and exciting news. Although we're talking doom and gloom about a 4-5 Kansas State team that hasn't stopped the train on recruiting. There's a new commit in town, and we're going to discuss that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or you want to ride that hot hand, well, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's right. So head to FanDuel.com now to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, and thank you for making this your first listen today. Really appreciate that. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and continue making this one a really fun community to join right here in Locked On Kansas State, bringing you Wildcat coverage like no one else. And before my voice completely goes away, I apologize about that. My voice is going out on today's episode. There is a new commit in Manhattan, and it's an older target, if you will, one that's been around and offered since June, but finally after a visit to Manhattan this past weekend, he went with the commitment. That's Adrian Bekibele. He was a commitment. He committed on the 3rd of November. Defensive lineman, 6'3", 290 from Sweden. That's right, Rig Football Academy. And he is seen in the industry rankings. Rival has him as a 3-star in 83 overall. The 236 defensive lineman in the country, or again, in the rankings, not the country. And then 24/7 has him as the 130th, a little higher on him, and has him as an 86 overall 3-star. He had lots of offers. A ton of offers, and some from SEC teams like Georgia, Florida, Ohio State offered him as well. From what we're seeing, there's some interesting things from Bekibele, and he decides to go with Kansas State. So I think that's a really big win for Joe Klanderman, for Chris Kleiman. So you got to love that one as well. He came and played for Kansas State's one of their elite camps. And he made his visit in September, actually, not this past week, excuse me. And he said that one of his biggest reasons why he wanted to commit to Kansas State was the game atmosphere. He said he felt like home. He really liked it, and he is going to enroll in January. That means that you're going to get him in the early offseason. You're going to get him in spring ball. You're going to get him for all of it. So hopefully that can help push forward. This is a big win, I think, for the defense, because you got to remember they made a scheme change this past season. They went from the 3-3-5 over to the 4-man front, and this is a defensive lineman that, of course, you're going to try and start building that up in your recruiting process. According to his conversation with On3, he said that he is going to be seen as a 3-technique defensive lineman, but he said he can also play the 1 technique right up the middle or up front. So that's big. If he's a versatile kind of player, especially so early in his college career, something that's going to happen starting in 2026. He's the second defensive lineman that is recruited or committed to Kansas State. Kingston Hall, also the other one in this conversation that would be one of the other guys in this defensive lineman commitment. So far, good news for Kansas State. This rankings, the Kansas State's recruiting class is only seen around the 50s in the Power 4, but I think this is a lot better of a recruiting class than the numbers are actually giving it credit for. I think there's some absolute studs on this recruiting roster. I think there's some really fun names that we're going to start hearing in about a month when signing day officially happens, and a lot more to talk about this offseason as well. So lots of really good things to come up for Kansas State. But Adrian Bekibele, a defensive lineman from Sweden, lands with Kansas State and continues to move this recruiting class in the right direction. Remember, Kansas State had one of the biggest recruiting classes, one of the best recruiting classes in college football, or really in the program's history, I should say, last year. I don't think it's going to be around the same type of level this year, but the momentum is important, especially when you have a down year like you're having right now in the record books. So far, we're not seeing too many people stray away or move away from their commitments with Kansas State. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Again, apologize about my voice if you're hearing this and listening to it and you're like, man, Christian doesn't sound the same. Sounds like I'm about to get one of those bugs, but that's not going to change us. We are going to continue giving you Wildcat coverage every single day right here on Locked On Kansas State. I thank you for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen today. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Big 12. Drake Toll has you covered. He breaks down everything from the most exciting conference in college sports, one that might get 3 teams in the college football playoffs. That's right. So check it out, from the rivalries to the championship game and even everything in between. Check out Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.